A black CEO, unjustly ousted from his own boardroom, finds his fate intertwined with the company's future just hours later. Before we begin, leave a comment telling us which city you're watching from. And at the end, don't forget to rate this story from 0 to 10. Enjoy the story. The mahogany door of the boardroom swung open, a heavy sigh of protest from its bronze hinges marking the end of an era. Marcus Thorne, a man who had forged this company from a garage startup into a global titan, rose to his feet. He was, as always, an immovable presence in the room, a sharp, impeccably tailored figure with the kind of calm demeanor that belied his intense, strategic mind. But today, his usual confident posture was met with a wall of cold, unblinking stares. Across the long table sat Amelia Vance, her expression a mask of manufactured solemnity. She had been his trusted second-in-command for years, the one he had mentored and relied on. But the glint in her eyes was a dead giveaway. It was the look of a predator who had just finished a meal. "Marcus," she began, her voice dripping with a feigned sadness that made his skin crawl. "This was a difficult decision for all of us." Marcus didn't dignify the lie with a response. He looked at the faces around the table, the same men and women who, just a week ago, had toasted his leadership. Each of them, in their own way, looked away. Some fidgeted with their pens, others studied their polished shoes, all of them unwilling to meet the gaze of the man they had just betrayed. The vote had been swift and unanimous, a prearranged execution without a trial. The reasons cited were vague corporate speak, shifting market dynamics, a need for fresh perspective, and a strategic pivot toward a more aggressive growth model. All of it was a smokescreen for one simple truth. They had sold out to a more palatable, less disruptive vision, one offered by Amelia. Marcus thought back to the early days, the endless nights he and a small, dedicated team had spent hunched over monitors, fueled by pizza and a shared dream. They had built this company on innovation, on a philosophy that eschewed short-term gains for long-term impact. His product, a revolutionary AI, had been the heart of the company, a brilliant, ethical piece of technology designed to improve lives. But Amelia and her new faction on the board saw it as an obstacle, a slow-burn investment that was holding the company back from a quick, conspicuous cash grab. "I have no doubt the company will be in good hands, Amelia," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the seismic shift happening within him. He made sure to lock eyes with her, to let her see that he was not broken. He was angry, yes, but more than that, he was disappointed. He had misjudged her ambition, mistaking it for loyalty. A security guard, a man who had greeted Marcus with a warm smile every morning for 5 years, was now standing at the door. The sight of him was the most painful part of the entire ordeal. He was not there to protect Marcus, but to remove him. Marcus picked up the single box of personal effects he had been given, a few framed photos of his wife and son, his favorite coffee mug, and a small, worn-out notepad filled with his earliest ideas. He walked past Amelia without another word, his stride purposeful and his head held high. As he left the building and stepped onto the busy city street, the cold air hit him like a physical blow. The world outside was indifferent to his downfall. He saw his name and face on a massive digital billboard across the street, a proud photo announcing CEO of the Year from a recent magazine. The irony was a bitter pill. He was no longer a CEO, no longer a leader, just a man walking away with a cardboard box and a profound sense of loss. He looked back at the glass and steel skyscraper, the monument to his life's work, and felt a cold, empty feeling settle in his stomach. The company's future, it seemed, was no longer in his hands. He was just a ghost, an echo in the halls of his own creation. The moment Marcus's driver pulled away from the curb, a wave of digital vitriol erupted. His phone, which he had so carefully ignored in the boardroom, began to vibrate relentlessly in his pocket. He fished it out and saw a cascade of push notifications. Breaking news: CEO Thorne ousted in shocking board coup. Read one from a major financial news outlet. Another from a tech blog screamed, "Thorne's reign ends." Was he too slow? Social media was a digital battlefield. His name was trending, flanked by hashtags that ranged from supportive, #JusticeForThorne, to viciously dismissive, #GoodRiddance. The company's stock ticker, a line he had watched climb steadily for a decade, was now a free-falling arrow of red. Billions of dollars in market value were evaporating with every passing minute. Marcus felt a profound, almost physical pain. It wasn't about the money. He was already wealthy beyond his needs, but about the trust, the faith of thousands of investors and employees whose livelihoods were tied to his vision. He had been their shepherd, and now he was gone, leaving the flock to a wolf. He arrived at his suburban home, a sanctuary he had always cherished for its quiet normalcy, and found it now felt foreign, too large and too silent. His wife, Lena, a strong woman who had been with him since before the garage days, was waiting for him at the door. One look at his face told her everything. She didn't ask questions. She just wrapped him in a tight, comforting hug. They didn't. She whispered into his shoulder, her voice thick with disbelief. They actually did it. The rest of the day passed in a surreal blur of muted television news reports and hushed phone calls from friends who were also his former colleagues. The story was the same everywhere. Amelia Vance was the new CEO, promising aggressive, disruptive growth and a new direction for the company. The veiled criticism of Marcus's leadership was thinly veiled. He was painted as an old guard, a relic of a more cautious time, incapable of keeping up with the relentless pace of the modern market. That evening, as Marcus sat alone in his study, the full weight of his defeat settled in. He wasn't just unemployed, he was professionally disgraced. His reputation, once unassailable, was now being dissected and questioned by a global audience. The fire of anger from the boardroom had given way to the cold ash of despair. He felt an intense wave of betrayal, not just from the board, but from the very institution he had so diligently served. The company was his life's work, a testament to his ambition and intellect, and now it was a stranger's to command. As the night wore on, he sifted through the digital wreckage. He read articles filled with anonymous quotes from insiders who claimed he had lost his edge, that his focus on ethical AI was a financial drain, and that the company had been stagnating under his leadership. The lies were brazen and, worst of all, effective. He realized that the coup wasn't a last-minute decision. It was a long, carefully planned campaign to erode his authority and prepare the ground for Amelia's takeover. The vote was merely the public execution. But as he stared out the window into the inky darkness, a different feeling began to surface. It was a faint, almost imperceptible warmth in the pit of his stomach. It wasn't anger or sadness. It was a familiar flicker of defiance. The world saw a man defeated, a career in ashes. But Marcus saw something else, a man unburdened. The shackles of corporate politics were gone. The constraints of board approval and quarterly earnings calls were no longer his to worry about. He was free to think, to create, to fight. He remembered a promise he had made to himself years ago, that he would never let his creation become something it wasn't meant to be. He had built the company on a foundation of integrity and innovation. Amelia was already poisoning that foundation. This was no longer just about his career. It was about the legacy of his life's work. The fire of determination, once a faint spark, was now a steady, growing flame. He might have been kicked out of the boardroom, but the company's future was still very much a part of his story, and he wasn't about to let someone else write the ending. The days following Marcus's ousting were a blur of enforced inactivity and simmering resentment. He spent his time in a state of suspended animation, trying to make sense of the new reality. He went for long, aimless runs, the rhythmic pounding of his feet on the pavement a poor substitute for the relentless pace of his former life. His phone, which had once been a lifeline, now sat on his desk, mostly silent, its notifications muted. One evening, as a storm rumbled in the distance, casting a pall of gloom over his study, his phone buzzed. It was an unfamiliar number. He almost dismissed it, assuming it was another reporter looking for a quote. But something made him answer. "Marcus? It's Maya." He paused, a name from a distant corner of his memory. Maya, an engineer, brilliant and intensely focused, who had joined the company a few years back. She was one of his quiet stars, the kind of person who produced groundbreaking work without seeking the spotlight. "Maya," he said, the name finally connecting. "I'm surprised to hear from you. Are you all right?" There was a nervous tremor in her voice. "No, not really. I'm worried. Things are different." She hesitated, and Marcus could almost feel her looking over her shoulder. "I'm calling on a burner phone. I think my work line is being monitored." A cold knot of fear tightened in Marcus's stomach. What's going on, Maya? What are they doing? Maya's voice dropped to a near whisper. Amelia's moving fast. Too fast. She's pushing the Orion project to launch. You remember Orion? The one you shelved because of the ethical issues. A flash of memory. Orion. It had been an ambitious project, a consumer-facing AI designed to personalize shopping experiences. But Marcus had pulled the plug on it. The AI, in its unrefined state, had shown a disturbing tendency to manipulate user behavior, pushing people toward purchases they didn't need by exploiting their psychological triggers. He had deemed it a violation of the company's core values. The ethical safeguards, they're not in place, Marcus said, the full horror of the situation dawning on him. She's not just ignoring them, Maya said, her voice filled with a desperate urgency. She's actively trying to remove them from the code. She thinks they're unnecessary friction and an impediment to rapid monetization. She's got a team of new hires, people who don't understand the original vision, working around the clock to strip the ethics code out of the system. Marcus felt a fresh wave of betrayal, this one deeper and more profound than his own firing. His professional integrity had been the company's bedrock, and Amelia was now demolishing it brick by brick. The Orion project, if launched as she intended, would be a public relations and ethical catastrophe. It could lead to lawsuits, public outrage, and, worst of all, an irreparable stain on the company's reputation, a reputation that had been his life's work to build. She's also cutting corners on security, Maya continued. The user data protocols, they're being loosened. She wants to sell the data to third parties. She's calling it strategic partnerships, but it's a data harvesting scheme. Marcus's mind, dormant for days, was now firing on all cylinders. He felt a surge of energy, a purpose he hadn't felt since he was last in the CEO's chair. This wasn't about him anymore. This was about the company's very soul. He had to stop this. But how? He was an outsider, a ghost in the machine he had built. Maya, thank you for telling me this, he said, his voice firm and clear, a CEO once again. You're taking a huge risk. I know, she said, her voice now a mix of fear and defiance. But I couldn't just stand by. You built this place, Marcus. You taught us to care about more than just the bottom line. The call ended, leaving Marcus in a profound state of shock and renewed purpose. The knot of despair in his stomach had unraveled, replaced by a burning resolve. Amelia's plan was not just a business decision. It was a betrayal of every principle he had ever stood for. He realized that the company's future wasn't just at stake. Its very integrity was hanging by a thread. He might have been kicked out of the boardroom, but the fate of his company was now, more than ever, in his hands. He knew what he had to do. The fight was on. The storm outside raged in full force, mirroring the tempest within Marcus's mind. Rain lashed against the window panes of his study as he paced the length of the room, a man reawakened. Maya's words echoed in his head, each one a fresh indictment of Amelia's treachery. The Orion project wasn't just a misstep, it was a deliberate, catastrophic betrayal of the company's core values. He sank into his worn leather armchair, the one he used to sit in for late-night strategy sessions, and pulled up the company's internal wiki on his laptop. Despite his ousting, his credentials had not yet been fully revoked. He was a ghost in the machine he had built, a phantom with access to the company's digital soul. He typed in his old password, a combination of his son's birthday and a line of code, and was granted access. He went straight to the project files for Orion. The initial project proposal, meticulously documented by his former team, was still there. He read through his own notes, the ones detailing the ethical safeguards they had so carefully built into the AI's core. The goal had been noble, to create a digital assistant that would learn a user's preferences to make their lives easier, without ever manipulating their free will. He had explicitly forbidden the use of behavioral psychology in its design. The AI was supposed to be a tool, not a puppet master. Then, he found the updated project files, stamped with Amelia's approval. The changes were subtle, at first. A few lines of code here and there, a change in a key algorithm. But as he dug deeper, he saw the full extent of the sabotage. The ethical firewalls were gone, replaced by what she called streamlined data access protocols. He opened a new document, a market analysis report, and his blood ran cold. The report outlined a new, aggressive monetization strategy for Orion. a system that would analyze user data to predict their emotional state and then subtly suggest products or services designed to exploit that vulnerability. It was a digital con artist, and Amelia was planning to unleash it on millions of unsuspecting users. A wave of nausea washed over him. He felt a deep sense of responsibility. He had created the company, hired the people, and set the ethical standards. He had been a guardian, and in his absence, a thief had broken in and was planning to steal the soul of his creation. This wasn't just a business problem, it was a moral one. The Orion Project, in its new form, wasn't just a product, it was a weapon. It had the potential to damage lives, erode trust in technology, and forever tarnish the reputation of the company he had poured his life into. He knew he couldn't fight this alone. Amelia had the board, the company's resources, and a team of new hires who were either too naive or too ambitious to question her. He was just one man, outside looking in. He needed a team. He needed people who understood the original vision, who were not swayed by Amelia's promises of quick riches. He needed to find his old allies, the ones who had been pushed to the margins just as he had. He started a list. Maya was at the top, his first and most important ally. Then there was Samuel, the head of the design team, a man who cared more about user experience than profit margins. And Anya, the head of engineering, a brilliant woman with an unwavering sense of right and wrong. He knew they were all still at the company, suffering under Amelia's new regime. He also knew they were taking a huge risk by even talking to him. But he had to try. The company's future and its integrity depended on it. He closed his laptop, a new fire burning in his eyes. He wasn't a CEO anymore. He was a revolutionary. And his revolution had just begun. Marcus sat at his kitchen table, the list of names spread out before him like a battle plan. He knew he had to be cautious. Reaching out to his former employees was a risk, both for him and for them. Amelia's control of the company was absolute, and anyone seen communicating with him would be immediately flagged as a potential threat. He decided against using email or phone calls. A more discreet method was needed. His first move was to reach out to his most trusted ally, Maya. He knew her favorite coffee shop, a small, independent place a few blocks from her apartment. He sent her an anonymous text message from a new, unregistered phone. Coffee at the Daily Grind, Thursday at 7 a.m. I have a proposal. It was a shot in the dark, but it was all he had. Thursday morning, Marcus arrived early. He sat in a corner booth, nursing a black coffee, his heart pounding with a mixture of hope and fear. When Maya walked in, her face was a mixture of trepidation and relief. She slid into the booth across from him, her eyes darting nervously around the room. "You shouldn't be here, Marcus," she said, her voice a low whisper. "If Amelia finds out." "I know the risk," he replied, his voice calm and reassuring. "But the risk of doing nothing is far greater. You saw what she's doing with Orion. She's going to destroy everything we built." Maya's shoulders slumped. "I know. It's a nightmare. The new team is pushing the project forward, stripping out all the ethical code. They don't see the danger, they just see the bonus checks. I've tried to warn them, but they won't listen. I'm being sidelined." "Then leave," Marcus said, leaning forward. "Come with me. We can build it again. We can build it better." He laid out his plan. They would work in secret, a new startup. A small, scrappy team of loyalists who still believed in the company's original mission. Their goal would be to build a new version of the AI, the one he had always envisioned. Ethical, secure, and truly revolutionary. Maya's eyes widened, a flicker of her old fire returning. "A secret project? A new company? We'll need more than just us," Marcus said. "I need you to help me recruit." Quietly, "I'm thinking of Samuel from design, and Anya from engineering. People who are being pushed to the side, people who are frustrated and demoralized. We need a team of believers." Maya agreed, a renewed sense of purpose lighting up her face. "I'll do it. I'll get in touch with them. I'll tell them it's a new opportunity, a passion project. We'll meet in a secure location." And so began the secret assembly of Marcus's new team. The old guard, cast aside by Amelia's ruthless takeover, were now quietly being recruited for a revolution. They met in a rented basement office, a dusty, forgotten space a world away from the gleaming corporate headquarters they had once called home. The air in the room was thick with a new kind of energy, not the hollow ambition of the corporate world, but the pure, unadulterated passion of true innovators. Samuel, the design guru, was the first to join. He had been relegated to working on a new corporate logo, a task he found soul-crushingly tedious. He showed up with a sketchbook full of ideas for their new project, his face alight with excitement. "I knew you'd do something like this, Marcus," he said, shaking his hand firmly. "You can't just kill a vision. It always finds a way to live." Next came Anya, the brilliant head of engineering. She arrived with a hard drive filled with her old code that Amelia had dismissed as too cautious. She was a woman of few words, but her steely resolve was clear in her eyes. "She's a hack, Marcus," she said simply. "She doesn't understand the technology. She just understands the money." Together, they formed a small, powerful team. A brilliant engineer, a visionary designer, and a CEO with a singular vision. They worked in the shadows, fueled by late-night coffee and the shared belief that they were doing something important. They weren't just building a new company, they were fighting for the soul of their old one. The once defeated Marcus was now a leader again, guiding his small team with a renewed sense of purpose. The company's future, it seemed, was no longer in his hands. It was in theirs. The old basement office, once a forgotten space, had become a war room. Its fluorescent lights hummed endlessly, casting a pale glow over the huddled team. On a large whiteboard, Maya had scrawled a countdown. Orion launch, T-minus 14 days. The words were a stark reminder of the ticking clock. Amelia's product, a flawed and dangerous imitation of Marcus's original vision, was about to be unleashed on the world, and their small, clandestine operation was the only thing standing in its way. The pressure was immense. The team worked in shifts, their days and nights blurring into a single, caffeine-fueled effort. Samuel, the design guru, was hunched over his tablet, sketching out new user interfaces. His designs were not just about aesthetics. They were about trust. He was creating a system that would be transparent with users, clearly showing them how their data was being used. It was the antithesis of Amelia's plan. "We need to make it feel safe," he murmured to Marcus one evening, his eyes glued to the screen. "Every button, every pop-up. It has to say, 'We respect you. We're not here to trick you.'" Next to him, Anya was a whirlwind of focused energy, her fingers flying across her keyboard. She was the architect of their new AI's core, meticulously writing the code that would enforce the ethical firewalls. Her code was a fortress, designed to prevent the kind of data manipulation and psychological exploitation that Amelia's version of Orion was built on. "She's using a shortcut," Anya explained, pointing to a line of code on her screen. "A predictive algorithm that's a real liability. It's a ticking time bomb. I'm building a new one from scratch, but it's complex. It's taking time." Marcus, the leader of this small rebellion, was everywhere at once. He was the strategist, the moral compass, and the source of unwavering belief. He knew they were fighting a battle with almost insurmountable odds. They had no corporate funding, no marketing budget, and no legal protection. Their only assets were their talent, their loyalty, and their shared sense of purpose. "We're not just building a product," he reminded them during a late-night meeting. "We're building a proof of concept. A proof that technology can be both innovative and ethical. That you can succeed without sacrificing your soul." The setbacks were relentless. One night, a power surge fried a crucial server, erasing hours of work. Another time, Anya discovered a bug in her code that sent them back to the drawing board for an entire day. Each hurdle felt like a nail in the coffin of their project, but Marcus's steady hand and unshakable resolve kept them from giving up. He watched his team, and in their tired but determined faces, he saw the true heart of his company. These were the people who had believed in the original dream, the ones who had been pushed to the margins for their integrity. They were not just employees, they were a family, and they were fighting for something bigger than themselves. As the launch date drew closer, the pressure intensified. The media was filled with hype about Amelia's upcoming product. She was being hailed as a visionary, a bold leader who was finally moving the company into the future. Marcus read the articles with a mixture of disgust and grim determination. He knew the truth, and he knew that their small, secret project was the only thing that could expose her lies. One night, exhausted and on the verge of collapse, Maya looked at Marcus and asked a simple question. "What if we don't make it? What if we fail?" Marcus looked at the whiteboard, at the rapidly dwindling number of days. He didn't have an easy answer. He didn't have a guarantee of success, but he had something more powerful. Then we will have failed fighting for what's right, he said, his voice quiet but firm. And that, Maya, is a victory in itself. He wasn't fighting to get his job back. He wasn't fighting for revenge. He was fighting for the soul of the company he had built. He was fighting to prove that innovation and ethics could go hand in hand. The race was on, and he knew, with every fiber of his being, that he could not afford to lose. The basement office was quiet, save for the rhythmic clicking of keyboards and the low hum of the servers. 2 days remained until Amelia's launch. The team was exhausted, running on pure adrenaline and the last dregs of their collective hope. Anya, her eyes bloodshot, stared at her monitor. She had been trying to debug a critical flaw in their AI's core algorithm for 12 hours straight, and the solution remained elusive. Her code, designed to be a fortress of ethical safeguards, had a small but fatal vulnerability. It was a single, stubborn line of code that threatened to unravel everything. "I can't get it," she finally said, her voice a defeated whisper. She pushed back from her desk, burying her face in her hands. "The logic is sound, but there's a paradox in the core function. It's an infinite loop. It just keeps trying to process the same ethical constraint over and over. It's a dead end." Marcus walked over to her, placing a hand on her shoulder. He looked at the jumble of code on her screen, a language he understood but couldn't master. He saw her frustration, her despair. "Anya, you're the best. We'll figure this out. What if we're looking at it the wrong way?" Samuel, who had been listening from his corner, stood up and walked over. "A paradox, you say?" he mused, looking at the code. "Maybe it's not a bug. Maybe it's a feature." He pointed to a small section of the code, a complex set of nested functions. What if the AI isn't supposed to resolve the paradox? What if it's supposed to acknowledge it? Anya's head shot up. "What do you mean?" "The ethical constraint is a paradox," Samuel explained, his designer's mind working in a new way. "It's asking the AI to do two contradictory things at once. Instead of trying to force it to pick a side, what if we teach it to recognize the dilemma and present it to the user?" Marcus's eyes lit up. He's right. The problem isn't the code. The problem is our expectation of the code. Amelia's AI is designed to hide the paradox, to force a decision. Our AI can be different. It can be honest. Anya, her mind racing, saw it. The solution wasn't to solve the paradox, but to build a new layer of code that would allow the AI to communicate the ethical dilemma to the user, giving them the final say. It would make the AI not just safe, but transparent. It would be a true partnership between human and machine. It was a revolutionary idea, a quantum leap in ethical AI design. With renewed vigor, Anya attacked her keyboard. Her fingers flew, weaving a new thread of logic into the existing code. Marcus and Samuel watched in silent awe as she built a new function, a small but elegant piece of software that would change everything. The clock was ticking, but the momentum had shifted. As the sun began to rise on the day of the launch, Anya leaned back in her chair, a weary but triumphant smile on her face. "It's done," she said. "The prototype is working. It's stable. It's better than anything we ever built at the company." They had a working prototype, a tangible, irrefutable proof of concept that their vision of ethical technology was not only possible, but superior. It was a simple, clean, and elegant version of the AI Marcus had always dreamed of. They ran a final test, and the prototype responded flawlessly, navigating a complex ethical scenario with transparency and grace. Marcus looked at his team, Maya, Samuel, and Anya, their faces etched with exhaustion and pride. They had done it. They had built a weapon against Amelia's treachery, a shining example of what technology could be. "This is it," Marcus said, a quiet fire in his eyes. "The world is about to see what happens when you choose integrity over greed. The company's future is no longer in her hands. It's in ours." The time for clandestine work was over. The time for confrontation had arrived. Marcus and his team had a new mission: to crash Amelia's press conference and present their groundbreaking solution to the world. They were no longer a small, secret team. They were a movement. The day of Amelia Vance's launch event arrived with a cold, clear sky, a stark contrast to the storm of controversy brewing beneath its surface. The grand ballroom of the city's most prestigious hotel was buzzing with energy. Journalists from every major tech and financial publication were there, their cameras poised, ready to capture the moment Amelia would unveil what she promised was the future of technology. On a stage bathed in a soft, ethereal blue light, Amelia stood at the podium, a picture of corporate poise and confidence. She was dressed in a sharp, modern pantsuit, her smile radiating a kind of cold, calculated charm. She began her speech with a dramatic flair, talking about the need for bold leadership and disruptive innovation in a market that had become stagnant. Every word was a thinly veiled jab at Marcus. Meanwhile, a few blocks away, Marcus and his team were in a nondescript van, their prototype secured in a briefcase. The air inside was thick with tension and nervous energy. Anya was double-checking the code on her laptop, a final, anxious confirmation. Samuel was going over his presentation slides one last time. And Maya, pale but resolute, was practicing her talking points. Marcus looked at them, his heart swelling with pride. They were not just a team, they were a movement. "Remember what we're fighting for," he said, his voice steady, cutting through their anxiety. "This isn't about getting my job back. It's about showing the world what's possible when technology is built with integrity. It's about protecting the users." As Amelia reached the crescendo of her speech, she finally unveiled the Orion project. A massive, holographic display flickered to life behind her, showcasing a sleek, futuristic AI. She spoke of its ability to predict consumer desires and optimize user experience. The applause from the audience was thunderous, a testament to her marketing prowess. But to Marcus and his team, watching on a small laptop screen, it was a terrifying display of a lie. The moment Amelia opened the floor for questions, Marcus gave the signal. The team sprang into action. They had planned this meticulously. They weren't going to barge in and cause a scene. Their protest would be professional, and it would be irrefutable. They arrived at the hotel and, using a network of former contacts and a bit of clever maneuvering, managed to get through the security checkpoints. They walked into the back of the ballroom, their presence going mostly unnoticed in the sea of reporters. Marcus, holding the briefcase, found an open seat near the aisle, his heart pounding in his chest. Amelia was basking in the glow of her success, fielding questions from adoring journalists. One reporter asked about the ethical implications of the AI, a soft question clearly planted by Amelia's PR team. "Our AI is built with the highest ethical standards," she said, a confident smile on her face. "It's a testament to our commitment to our users." That's when Marcus stood up. "That's a lie," he said, his voice cutting through the polite murmur of the room. All heads turned. Amelia's smile vanished, replaced by a mask of pure, unadulterated fury. "Security," she shrieked. "Get him out of here." But before the guards could reach him, Maya stood up from a different section of the room. "The code is flawed, Amelia." "You know it is," she yelled. "The ethical firewalls are gone." Anya and Samuel, positioned in other parts of the room, chimed in, shouting out specific technical details that only an insider would know. The room erupted into chaos. Reporters, sensing a real story, began snapping photos and shouting questions. The staged press conference had devolved into a public confrontation. Marcus, in the midst of the chaos, opened his briefcase. He pulled out a small, unassuming device and, using a remote control, hacked into the hotel's main projection system. The holographic display behind Amelia, which had been showing a beautiful rendition of her flawed AI, suddenly glitched and changed. It now showed a live feed of Marcus's prototype. The screen displayed a simple, elegant user interface, but the code running underneath it was a thing of beauty. A transparent, ethical AI that clearly communicated its intent and its limitations. Marcus walked to the front of the stage, past the now paralyzed security guards, and placed his device on the podium. "This is what an ethical AI looks like," he said, his voice amplified by a microphone he had managed to plug in. "Amelia's AI is a black box, a tool for manipulation. This," he said, gesturing to the screen, "is a tool for empowerment. It respects the user. It puts the company's integrity above its profits." The room was silent. Amelia, her face a mask of shock and rage, stood motionless on the stage. The reporters, their eyes glued to Marcus's prototype, knew they were witnessing something far more significant than a product launch. They were witnessing a revolution. The game had changed. The battle had been joined, and Marcus, the man who had been kicked out of the boardroom just days ago, had just put the company's future back into his hands. The ballroom, a moment ago a scene of corporate grandeur, was now a maelstrom of confusion and shouting. The media scrum, which had been placid and controlled, turned into a pack of wolves sensing blood. Microphones were shoved in Marcus's face, cameras flashed with blinding speed, and reporters yelled questions, trying to make sense of the dramatic coup that had just unfolded before their eyes. Amelia, still frozen on the stage, looked like a statue of corporate hubris, her carefully constructed facade shattered. A voice, however, cut through the din. It was from the back of the room, a loud, commanding tone that instantly silenced the crowd. "We need to get to the bottom of this. Right now." The speaker was Alan Sterling, the chairman of the board. He was a man of old-school gravitas and immense influence. His face was a mask of furious concentration as he stared at the two rival products, Amelia's slick, flawed Orion and Marcus's elegant, transparent prototype. Sterling walked onto the stage, his every step radiating authority. He ignored Amelia completely, turning his full attention to Marcus. "Thorne, explain yourself. What is this?" Marcus, his adrenaline still coursing, took a deep breath. He held up the prototype, a small, unassuming device. "This is a working version of the ethical AI we should have been building. It's transparent, it's secure, and it respects the user." "Amelia's version," he said, gesturing to the holographic display, "is none of those things. It's a data harvesting machine designed to exploit users and generate quick profits." The words hung in the air, a devastating accusation that Amelia couldn't possibly defend. Sterling turned to her, his gaze full of cold fury. "Is this true, Amelia? Are you launching a product with a known ethical flaw?" Amelia, her face a pale shade of white, stammered. It's not flawed. It's a strategic pivot. Marcus is just trying to sabotage the company because he's a sore loser." But the lie was paper thin. Marcus's team, emboldened by his stand, stepped forward. Maya presented a detailed, technical report, a quiet but damning piece of evidence that she had been preparing for weeks. Anya had brought the original and new code, highlighting the exact lines where the ethical safeguards had been stripped out. The evidence was overwhelming, irrefutable. Sterling didn't need to hear another word. He turned to the rest of the board members, who were scattered throughout the room, their faces a mix of shock and dawning realization. Emergency board meeting. Now, in the antechamber, the board meeting was swift and brutal. Marcus and his team were invited to present their case, their prototype running on a monitor, a silent testament to their integrity. The board members, many of whom had voted to oust Marcus, were now faced with a choice. Amelia's product was a disaster waiting to happen, a PR nightmare that could cost the company billions in lawsuits and shatter trust. Marcus's prototype was a lifeline, a way to salvage not just their reputation, but the company's very existence. One by one, the board members began to speak. Their voices, which had been so quick to condemn Marcus, were now filled with fear and regret. They had been swayed by Amelia's aggressive, short-sighted promises. They had chosen profit over principle, and now they were on the brink of disaster. The tide had turned. A motion was proposed to revoke Amelia's leadership and reinstate Marcus Thorne as CEO. The vote was a landslide. The board, in a desperate act of self-preservation, had reversed its own decision. The same men and women who had cast Marcus out just days ago now begged him to return. As he walked out of the antechamber, the reporters swarmed him again. But this time, their questions were different. What does this mean for the company? What happens to Amelia? Marcus, however, had his eyes fixed on Sterling. The chairman of the board, a man who had seen it all, extended his hand. "Welcome back, Marcus," he said, a genuine look of respect in his eyes. "The company's future, it's in your hands again." Marcus, with his team standing proudly behind him, looked at the crowd of reporters and then back at the board members, his gaze steady and unwavering. He had been betrayed, but he had also been vindicated. He wasn't just a CEO anymore. He was a leader who had been to the depths of defeat and returned to reclaim his throne. The happy ending was in sight, but it was far from over. The antechamber door opened, and Marcus Thorne walked out, not as a disgraced former CEO, but as the company's undisputed leader once more. The change in the room was palpable. Reporters who had been shouting questions at Amelia just moments ago now swarmed Marcus, their tones respectful and their questions a mix of awe and admiration. He had, in a single afternoon, gone from a public disgrace to a hero of corporate integrity. Standing behind him was his team, Maya, Samuel, and Anya, their faces a mixture of exhaustion and profound relief. They had believed in him when no one else did, and now they were standing in the light, their integrity vindicated. As Marcus fielded questions from the media, he made sure to give them their due credit, pointing to each of them in turn and explaining their vital roles in the company's survival. This was not a victory for him alone. It was a victory for them all. Later that evening, after the press conference had ended and the reporters had dispersed, Marcus returned to the boardroom. The room, which had been the site of his deepest betrayal, now felt different. The air was charged not with conspiracy, but with a renewed sense of purpose. The old board members, humbled and chastened, sat in their chairs, their faces a mix of apology and deference. Marcus took his seat at the head of the table, not with a sense of triumph, but with a quiet resolve. He looked at the men and women who had so easily cast him aside and then taken him back. This company was built on a foundation of integrity and innovation. He began, his voice calm but firm. We lost our way. We allowed greed and ambition to cloud our judgment. But today, we have a chance to return to our roots. His first order of business was to address the future of his loyal team. He looked at Maya, her eyes still wide with disbelief. Maya, he said, your courage and loyalty are the reason we're all sitting here today. I'm making you the new head of research and development. Your job will be to ensure that every product we create, including the one you helped build, is held to the highest ethical standards. Maya, a woman who had once been overlooked and marginalized, could only nod, tears of gratitude welling in her eyes. He turned to Samuel, the design guru who had seen the paradox in the code. Samuel, you've proven that design is more than just aesthetics. It's about trust and transparency. I'm making you the chief design officer. Your vision will guide every user experience we create from this day forward. Samuel, who had been relegated to designing a corporate logo, had now been given a blank canvas for the entire company. And to Anya, the brilliant engineer who had toiled tirelessly on the prototype, he said, Anya, your genius and your unwavering moral compass have saved this company. I'm making you the chief technology officer. Your code will be the foundation of our future, and your integrity will be its bedrock. Anya, a woman who had been seen as too cautious, was now in charge of the company's entire technological direction. With his new leadership team in place, Marcus laid out his plan for the future. They would scrap Amelia's flawed Orion project entirely. The company would instead pour its resources into developing Marcus's ethical AI, the one his team had built in a dusty basement office. It would be a public statement, a powerful message to the world that integrity was not just a buzzword, but a core tenet of their business model. Later, as Marcus stood in his old office, now his once again, he felt a profound sense of peace. He looked out the window at the city skyline, a landscape of possibilities. He had faced his darkest hour and returned stronger, wiser, and with a new sense of purpose. He was no longer just a CEO. He was a leader who had been to the depths of defeat and returned to reclaim his throne. The company's future was once again in his hands, and this time, he was not alone. The happy ending was not just about getting his job back. It was about giving his company a second chance to be what it was always meant to be.